Oh, hello there, it's Loxton. I just finished going over this video script, and let me tell you now, by the end of this video, you will be very sad, maybe even cry. So, trust me, this video's ending is rather unpheasant. Question: how do you take one of the most common birds in the modern world and make an interesting Pokemon out of it? The answer: you don't. You make Pidove. Now honestly, Pidove is kinda cute, but it's the other two that are abominations. I mean, Pidove on its own, it's a fluffy, plump, small burb that's both a pigeon and a dove. A Pidove, if you will. There's not really much of a difference between the two, though. Both birds are grouped in the Columbidae family, and they're cousins. Some even say that they're literally the same bird, but different colors. And that's pretty much it. No, really, there's not much here. During an interview for Black and White's release, Ken Sugimori stated the design philosophy for Pidove was to create as simple of a Pokemon as possible. So it really is just a cartoon pigeon. The only pinch of spice that they added was the heart pattern across the breast. Seems a bit random, but it's based on a pun. In Japan, they address both pigeons and doves as hato, which sounds a lot like the English word for heart, doesn't it? Hato? Heart? Especially if you were saying heart with a hard Japanese accent. Clever? Therefore, Game Freak made a heart hato. Really simple, but still really cool. Yeah, I'll say that, I'll give it to him. But even though Japan uses a generic term, Pidove is specifically based on a rock pigeon. This is the species you'll see when visiting almost any modern city across the planet. When visiting them, just try not to get pooped on because I got pooped on right on the forehead when I was like 10, visiting San Francisco with my family. It's unpleasant. Go back to where you came from, or so help me. But yeah, I was walking through the city and being oh so pretty, then my day got really... Oh no! Right on my huge, bulky wallet that was a massive target to begin with. Now I need a new one! If only today's sponsor could help! This video is sponsored by Ridge Wallets. Modern wallets for the modern person. It's the 2020s. Wallets don't need to be big honkin' things anymore. Especially not things that offer no protection from digital pickpocketers. Like, you know that cool feature where you just tap your card on the payment machine and it works? Digital pickpocketers can just like whoop near your butt and then they get your card data just like that. However, Ridge Wallets are not only styling with over 30 colors and patterns to choose from, but are designed with RFID blocking materials to protect against that very deed. And the wear and tear of everyday use. Thus their lifetime warranty. They can hold up to 12 cards, plus have room for cash while remaining as slim as possible. And you could go full out with a matching key case, which holds 1 to 6 keys without jingling. Ridge's more than 3 million customers and 50,000 5-star reviews makes them confident you'll love these too. So they offer a 99-day money-back guarantee if you don't. And you know what's coming up? Yeah, Father's Day, and this is the perfect dad gift, right? And with my link in the description, ridge.com/Loxton, you can save up to 40% through June 15th. Dads love deals, so it's like a double gift, or a quadruple gift even, because when you bundle up a wallet and a key case, you save even more.
Deal so good he passed out.
So again, check out ridge.com/Loxton for some slick wallets on the cutting ridge of technology. Unlike pigeons. These animals come in a variety of colors, from black to white, but it's not always black and white when your hato knows what's right. The gray morph is what matches Pidove exceptionally well, and I don't think it should come as a shock when I say the Unova region is based in America, primarily New York City, so modeling the city-based region's bird after the literal city bird is a no-brainer. A bird-brainer, if you will. But I bet you're wondering why these guys flooded the concrete jungle in the first place, though. Most animals generally steer clear of humanity as much as possible, but pigeons, they're eating out of our hands, literally, and not always voluntarily on our parts. Well, there's two main reasons why they're here and there and everywhere. The first is because we put them here. Despite being rampant within American cities, it's not like they were here to begin with. No, their native range expands the rocky cliffs of African and southern Eurasian coastlines, and then they were brought to European cities as a food source. Squab is actually pretty good. And it's the fancy term for pigeon meat, because if you just tell someone, oh, you're eating pigeon, it sounds lame and not very classy. You sound like a homeless, sad guy. Well, you say squab, oh, now it's fancy food. Then the 1600s happened. European colonizers were moving to the New World and brought their pigeons for the same reason they brought pigs and cows and horses. But like all livestock, a few inevitably escaped and started breeding within the villages and towns of early America. But what gave pigeons the edge over other introduced species was their ability to not only survive, but thrive off of human leftovers. For other bird species, basic human commodities offer little nutritional value, so they were forced to either move into the woods or die off. But urban pigeons eat breadcrumbs like superfood. Unfortunately, it still isn't good for them by any means, but the point is that they can survive off of it. And plus, they are called rock pigeons because they nest in sheer and rocky cliff faces, quite akin to the tall buildings and bridges and concrete jungles we humans build. And with no major predators outside of alley cats and the occasional city hawk, the species was destined to thrive. Especially considering their intelligence. They're among the smartest birds on Earth, after all, if you can believe it. Their pattern recognition abilities are said to be on par with dogs and even beyond some cats. They've been trained to recognize all 26 letters, over 1,000 words, and matching paintings to artists, just to name a few of their feats. And their intelligence doesn't stop here either. Pigeons have an acute sense of direction and location. They're able to navigate back to their nest even when extremely far away geographically, even if you move it away from that point in a closed box so it can't see where it's going. Yeah, it'll still make its way home, and this innate ability is what allows humanity to use homing pigeons. In dark times of war, soldiers would bring pigeons across enemy lines, and if ever caught in a pickle, a note would be tied to the pigeon's leg, and it was then released, allowing them to fly back home with the important message. This method of messaging came in handy throughout the early to mid-1900s when it was regularly used, and you might think it's outdated. But in some parts of the world, it is faster than the internet. In South Africa in 2009, a carrier pigeon famously carried a 4GB SD card 60 miles from the location of the internet server to the computer that was trying to download stuff. And they started that download at the same time they released the pigeon. Guess who won? Yeah. And won by a lot. By the time the pigeon reached its destination, the download was only 4% complete. Yeah, that pigeon could have transferred that data over a dozen times in the time it took one guy to just download it. And notably, this was on, at the time, South Africa's biggest internet provider. What are they doing? Come on. 2009? More like 2000 wine. And I would love to give you so many more historical examples of these birds in actions, but we still have a lot to get through. But if you want to learn more about real-life uses for homing pigeons, go check out How a Pigeon Won World War II on Biodaverse's channel. A link to their video is in the description and at the end of this video, and also he wrote this video, so definitely a good watch. Now, looking at the line's Pokedex entries, this amazing ability is referenced by one of Tranquill's, Pidove's evolution. It can return to its trainer's location regardless of the distance separating them. It's literally a homing pigeon, but that's where the connection between these two ends. Luckily, Sugimori gives us another lead on this Pokemon's design as well. They based its body patterns off of the Oriental turtle dove. And again, we have a name pun. Yes! This one is a bit more complicated though, so to severely simplify things, the Oriental turtle dove's Japanese name is pronounced, roughly, Kijibato, which translates to pheasant pigeon. Therefore, here we have an in-between of a pheasant and a pigeon. The first and third stage of the evolutionary lines. How fun. The Oriental turtle dove comparisons mostly stop at name and markings though. Tranquill's primary and shiny colors aren't accounted for by it, so maybe there's another pigeon it draws inspiration from too. Especially since that shiny is so weird, it looks like it fell in a vat of radioactive glow stick acid. That's a thing now. But no, there are actually a few species of green pigeons across the planet. Take the pink-necked green pigeon from Vietnam. Holy cowbird! No wonder why most things in nature are dull grays and browns. This guy stole all the color. It looks like sherbet. And they can also be pure green, which is what Shiny Tranquil is, but oh gosh, wow, I can't stop looking at it. Okay, back on subject. Technically, regular Tranquill could be a rock pigeon again as well, but what if it's not? Pheasants aren't related to pigeons, so there could be something else. And there absolutely is. It's probably the closest bird we have to a quail in design. I mean, hello, Tranquill, as in a tranquil quail. It's got a quill. And just like the turtle dove, quails can act as an in-between for doves and pheasants too. For starters, they're directly related to pheasants as both a part of the Pheasantidae family, and while pigeons aren't included in this family, there are columbidaes named after quails, so that has to count for something. In terms of color, plenty of species could fill the role too. Gray isn't a very distinct color for birds. However, the mountain quail is probably the closest. This waddly-doo hanging from its forehead is what drives home this connection for me though. The plume is the most unique feature of the quail family, typically a droopy head feather resembling the one seen on old American flappers. Yet, the mountain quail wears its plume differently, looking like a pair of spikes, and so does Tranquill. The spiked mohawk was a prime punk style Americans wore back in the 80s, and the back of Tranquill's hair resembles a mullet of sorts, a hairstyle originating from France but has since become synonymous with edgier American culture. Just think of how many American action movie stars from the 80s and 90s had this hair. I'd say it's a good explanation. Even better if Tranquill wasn't such a hippie. Enough with this peace mumbo-jumbo. Doves, symbols of peace. Where's your inner rage?
Don't you want to let your demons out? Don't you want to run down the hallway with your scissors pointed out?
The American 90s revived the mullet to a wider audience, both for men and women, and is distinct from the 80s version of the haircut by its puffiness at the bottom. Again, just like Tranquill. The 90s are generally looked back upon as one of the most peaceful decades in modern humanity, being known as a period of peace and prosperity. In Japan specifically, it was the 80s, being towards the end of their biggest economic boom ever, which is often referred to as the Japanese economic miracle. The US had a similar thing going on in the 90s, thanks in part to the beginning of the internet's mainstreamification. So let's just say there's a reason the virtual reality in the Matrix takes place in the 90s, one of America's most stable and prosperous time periods. And it's looked back upon even more fondly because of how suddenly all that peace and prosperity ended. Shortly after the 90s ended. Oh, I'm so sorry. 9/11 jokes are just plain wrong. Though it is fitting that this is also New York City. Actually, there's a common theory that the recently ruined part of Unova, the desert with the ruins that's right next to the city, is a reference to Ground Zero, but that's not the point here. The point here is this Pokédex entry. Many people believe that deep in the forest where Tranquill live, there is a peaceful place where there is no war. This is supposedly a reference to a utopia featured in a series of poems by Kenji Miyazawa, which exists in a fictional world called Ihatov, which is notable because Ihatov may have been a part of what influenced Tranquill's name in Japanese, Hatobo. If it were truly a utopia though, Tranquill would not evolve into Unfezant, a rather unpleasant pheasant Pokemon. Pokédex. People will sit up and take notice if you become the trainer of one. Yeah, no kidding, because this thing is ugly as heck. You must have a screw loose if you want this as your pet. I mean, clearly, it's a pheasant, a medium-sized game bird that, just like the rock pigeon, was brought over from Eurasia for food purposes. More specifically, it's based on the Siamese fireback. A unique detail about this Pokemon is that it is the only regional bird to have distinct sexual dimorphism, a phenomenon in which males and females of a species have distinct and obvious differences between the two outside of sex organs. Think like the mane on a lion or the tusks of elephants. The fireback has this as well. Here we see that the males look like, well, this, and the gals are just sort of a rusty brown color. Just kinda, yeah, that's a bird. Though the green part on male Unfezant is a bit tougher to explain since the firebacks only have greenish-blue undertones that match a lot closer to the shiny variant. But it does match the green seen on the head of the male ring-necked pheasant, the most widespread species across America. And aside from being gray with colorful underpants, the marbled and stripy patterns on the Pokemon are reflected by this animal too. You just gotta mix them together a little bit and boom! You got everything! However, cool real-world origins will not make up for the fact that its anime cry sounds like this. Oh, also, I did want to note that the Pokédex mentions that the females are the superior flyers in terms of stamina, while the males exceed in speed. In some species of bird, the females are larger than the males, meaning they have larger and stronger wings to aid in flight. The stronger you are, the more endurance you usually have, and generally, smaller things are faster than the larger ones. Wait, no. No, do not believe this bullfinch. This is a common logical fallacy. In reality, the larger birds in the same species tend to be the same speed or faster than the smaller ones. But I can at least understand why someone might think this. But what I don't understand is why they assigned this to the pheasant, as this observation doesn't actually apply to them in the slightest. Best theory I have just relates to the many more showy species of bird, like various birds of paradise, where the males get wacky with their excessive show feathers. Those obviously would increase drag, making it slightly harder for them to fly as swiftly and efficiently as the females. Think like the male Unfezant's red masquerade mask. Its exceptionally long, flangly wobble-doo bits are like fancy feathers found on the King of Saxony bird of paradise, for instance. Then the mask part itself is almost like a waddle, a term that you would likely associate with the leathery hangy thingy on a turkey, but for the record, that is actually a snood. The waddle is the old man saggy skin neck thingy that it has going on. But it's not exclusive to turkeys. Plenty of birds have waddles on various parts of their face, including the mask shape on pheasants. The waddle serves various purposes for various birds, including, but not limited to,
voice amplification, heat regulation, intimidation, sexual maturity, attracting mates, securing testosterone, predator evasion, territorial defense, keeping clean when digging, especially when digging their faces deep into the bodies of their prey,
and much, much more. Like, looking cool. It looks really cool, right? You know, I bet the Pokemon Company only really incorporated that last point into its design, which is why we have the Masquerade mask. It's that little pinch of spice again. It's just a pheasant with a mask, just a pinch of detail. It is kind of reminiscent of the Fireback's head feathers, though, just longer. And when I look at it, it sort of does look like Unfezant is wearing a fancy suit, doesn't it? Its neck ends in a point, like a V-neck of a tuxedo, almost like it's going to attend a masquerade, yeah? Masquerades were traditionally held in 18th century Europe, and the first recorded one was in London. And hold on, that's the third instance of cultural influence not originating from American culture. And yes, there is a lot of cultural influence not originating from American culture found in this bird. And yeah, they probably did that on purpose. You've probably realized that American culture is basically a big melting pot of other cultures from across the world, and all throughout history that's been the case. Well, for as long as it's been named America, anyway. And considering the pheasant, quail, and pigeon were all adopted from other parts of the world as well, it seems that they, too, these Pokemon, were probably brought to Unova, and thus they have remnants of other cultural influences within them. I'm sorry. I owe you all an apology. At the beginning of this video, I promised to make you sad, and I haven't done that yet. You came to this video, you liked, you subscribed, you watched all of my other videos, I hope, and I just dropped the ball. I promise to do better from now on. I don't expect to be forgiven, but let's begin. Have you ever fallen in love? Pidove once did. It's forgetful and not very bright, but many trainers love it anyway for its friendliness and sincerity. Where people go, these Pokemon follow. Humanity showed kindness, and for the first time in its young life, Pidove knew what it felt like to bond with another. It's a love fool. With its heart on its chest, it's still feeling the butterflies in early relationships and making mistakes like forgetting instructions out of nervousness. Not to mention, its shiny is based on the diamond dove. Hearts and diamonds are the universal symbols of love, no? Pidove acts like a young soul still in the honeymoon phase, and after a while, it evolves into Tranquill. It is now less anxious and in a more established state in its relationship. No longer does it feel all the emotions that come with a new relationship, but it remains just as loyal. It can return to its trainer's location, regardless of the distance separating them. Truly, this Pokemon feels secure with its trainer. It could live its whole life like this. It is at peace. But sometimes, things don't work out. Some point after evolving yet again, Unfezant and its trainer separated. And it wasn't from the Pokemon's end. It had been stuffed away in a PC, where it has remained since 2010. Once a young and happy soul, now a husk of null emotion, closed off from the world, appearing cranky to those who do not know its story. It now hides its emotions behind a shield, behind a mask.
I wear a mask with a smile for hours at a time.
Do not fret. It is no longer in pain. It has gotten used to this abandonment. While the common belief is that its name means it is an unpleasant pheasant, it could also be interpreted as an unfazed pheasant. Unfazed by the betrayal that once caused pain and shock. Now, it just feels numb. But which is worse? You probably reinforced this poor Pokemon's beliefs. To most Pokemon fans, Unfezant is by far their least favorite of the regional birds. It is a total outcast. Of the regional birds, it's the only one that is not a bird of prey. Rather, it is commonly eaten itself. It doesn't have any special forms or competitive relevance, nor does it have anything particularly cool about its design. Game Freak designed it to be an outlier compared to the others, and they did it on purpose. They intentionally designed it to be mundane and, to an extent, even repulsive. It was already hurt by one trainer, so what's a few tens of millions more? However, it doesn't have to be this way. They will never let themselves feel close to anyone other than their trainers. Of course, we just went over this, but who's to say a new trainer couldn't adopt them? A new eager trainer who won't judge it on competitive relevance or striking demeanor. Just someone to warm its cold, warm-blooded heart. Perhaps you could be that trainer, the trainer that comes and saves this poor Unfezant to allow it to feel love once again.
So, are you gonna finally use one?
What? No, ew, that ugly thing? Nah, it deserves love, but I'm not gonna give it.